What the heck is going on here?
What the heck is going on here? Jake's voice cut through the silence of Cascade Financial Group's 20th floor as he stood frozen in the doorway. Through the open conference room door, he could see them clearly now. Emma, his girlfriend of 3 years, pressed against the white wall in her turquoise blazer. Marcus Hyland, his boss, in his gray suit with his hand cradling her jaw, kissing her cheek as she stared forward with wide, panicked eyes. The lunch container slipped from Jake's grip and hit the floor with a sharp crack that made Emma's entire body go rigid. Marcus pulled back slowly, turning to face Jake with an expression that held no surprise, no guilt, just cold calculation. He straightened his tie as if Jake had simply interrupted a scheduled meeting. "Jake," Marcus said calmly, glancing at his watch. "Right on time." Jake's heart hammered against his ribs. "I asked what the hell this is." Emma's hand flew to her mouth, her face draining of color. "Jake, please, this isn't let me." "Actually, I'll explain," Marcus interrupted, gesturing toward the conference table. "Come inside. Close the door. We need to talk. All three of us." Jake's legs moved on their own, carrying him into the room as the door clicked shut behind him with the finality of a cell locking. Marcus motioned to one of the leather chairs. "Sit down." "This isn't what you think," Emma said, her voice breaking as tears spilled down her cheeks. Marcus settled into his chair, fingers steepling in front of him. "It's exactly what he thinks. But there's context he needs to hear." "Context?" Jake's voice shook with barely controlled rage. "I just walked in on you kissing my girlfriend." Marcus leaned back, completely composed. "Girlfriend. Interesting choice of words, considering what she's been to me for the past 8 months. The words landed like a physical blow. Emma's sob echoed through the conference room as Marcus sat there, utterly in control, and Jake realized with growing horror that this wasn't a moment of weakness he'd stumbled upon. This was something planned, something he was meant to see. Little did Jake know, the conversation that was about to unfold would shatter everything he thought he knew about his relationship, his career, and the lengths people would go to protect what they believed they were building. But to understand how Jake ended up in that conference room, staring at the wreckage of his future, we need to go back to where it all began. Before we continue, I want to give a special shout out to Jake Reed watching from Canada. Thank you so much for your comments and support on this channel. It truly means everything, and one of our characters was actually named in your honor. If you're watching right now and want your own shout out, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Now let's get into the story. 8 months earlier, Jake and Emma's Capitol Hill apartment had been filled with the kind of comfortable chaos that comes from building a life together. Sunday morning sunlight streamed through the windows as Emma poured coffee into 2 mugs, one with a chipped handle that Jake refused to throw away. "I'm telling you, the Ballard listing is perfect," Emma said, sliding Jake's mug across the counter. 3 bedrooms, walking distance to the farmer's market, and the mortgage payment is actually doable if we both keep getting those annual raises. Jake wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You really think we're ready for this? House, wedding, the whole thing?" "I know we are," Emma said, turning to kiss him. "We've been together 3 years, Jake. I want to build something permanent with you." What Jake didn't see in that moment was the tension Emma carried in her shoulders, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes when she looked at him lately. Because while they'd been planning their future, Jake's present at Cascade Financial Group had been quietly falling apart. The first sign had been the Henderson account 2 months prior. Jake had miscalculated the quarterly projections, and the error had cost the company nearly $50,000 in penalties. Then came the Riverside contract, the one that should have been straightforward but somehow spiraled into a nightmare of missed communications and documentation errors. Jake had been certain he'd followed protocol, but the audit showed otherwise. Emma had been working late more and more often, staying at the office until 8 or 9 p.m. She'd told Jake it was because of her increased responsibilities, the projects piling up. But the truth was, she'd been watching, listening, paying attention to the whispers in the break room, the concerned looks from senior management, when Jake's name came up in meetings. One evening at Pike Place Market, as they walked through the crowds and the smell of fresh flowers and ocean air filled the space between them, Jake had finally broken down. "I think I'm going to get fired," he'd said quietly, staring out at Elliott Bay. "The mistakes keep happening him. I don't know what's wrong with me." Emma had taken his hand, squeezing it tight. "You're not going to get fired. You're brilliant at what you do. Everyone has rough patches. What if this isn't a rough patch? What if I'm actually failing?" His voice had cracked. "Everything we've planned, the house, the wedding, it all depends on both of us staying employed. If I lose this job, I'm blacklisted in the industry. You know how it works." Emma had pulled him close, her heart breaking at the defeat in his voice. "We're going to be okay. I promise you. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out together." But that night, lying awake in bed while Jake slept beside her, Emma had made a decision. She couldn't let him fail. Couldn't let everything they'd built crumble because of a few mistakes that weren't even entirely his fault. The pressure at Cascade was intense, the expectations unrealistic. Someone needed to protect him. The next morning, Emma had walked into Marcus Hyland's office on the executive floor. Marcus was Jake's direct supervisor, the operations director who held Jake's career in his hands. He'd looked up from his computer screen, surprised to see her. "Emma Reed," he'd said, leaning back in his chair. "What can I do for you?" Emma had closed the door behind her, her heart hammering. "It's about Jake Carter. I need to talk to you about his performance reviews." Marcus's expression had shifted, something calculating moving behind his eyes. "I'm listening." "He's struggling," Emma had said, the words tumbling out. "But he's good at what he does. The mistakes aren't because he's incompetent, they're because he's overworked and the systems aren't clear. If you could just give him some support, some protection while he gets back on track, I'd be grateful." Marcus had stood up slowly, walking around his desk to stand in front of her. "Grateful. That's an interesting word." He'd studied her face for a long moment. "How grateful exactly?" Emma's stomach had dropped, but she'd forced herself to hold his gaze. "What do you want?" Marcus had smiled then, cold and predatory. "Companionship. Appreciation. Someone who makes me feel valued. In return, I bury Jake's mistakes. I fast-track your career. Everyone wins." Emma had stood there in that office, the Seattle skyline stretching beyond the windows, and thought about Jake's face at the market. The defeat, the fear, everything they'd planned together. "Okay," she'd whispered. Marcus had extended his hand. "Then we have an arrangement." Emma had shaken it, sealing a deal that would protect the man she loved while destroying everything between them. As she'd walked out of that office, she'd caught her reflection in the glass wall and barely recognized the woman staring back. Have you ever made a choice to protect someone you love that you knew would destroy them if they found out? Tell me in the comments what you would have done in Emma's position. Jake sank into the leather conference chair, his legs no longer able to support him. Emma remained standing near the wall, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her body together. Marcus settled into his seat across from Jake with the calm of a man conducting a routine business meeting. 8 months, Marcus said, his voice clinical and measured. That's how long Emma and I have been involved. It began in September, right after you nearly lost the Henderson account. Jake's mouth opened, but no sound came out. 8 months. He tried to count backward, tried to remember if there had been signs, moments he'd missed. Emma's face was streaked with tears, but she didn't deny it. This isn't what you think, Emma started, her voice breaking. It wasn't. It was exactly what it looks like, Marcus interrupted. Emma came to me with a problem. You were failing, Jake. Badly. And she was terrified you'd get fired, blacklisted, that everything you'd both planned would fall apart. So we made an arrangement. An arrangement, Jake repeated, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. Marcus leaned back, fingers steepled. Emma's promotion to senior analyst 3 months ago? That wasn't merit-based. That was payment. For keeping me company. For making me feel appreciated. The room tilted. Jake gripped the edge of the table. You're lying. Am I? Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolling through something before turning the screen toward Jake. It showed an internal email dated 3 months prior, recommending Emma Reed for immediate promotion to senior analyst. signed by Marcus Hyland. I fast-tracked her career. In exchange, she spent time with me. Dinners, late nights at the office, moments like the one you just witnessed. Emma's sob cut through the air. Jake, please, I did it for us. You were going to lose your job. We needed my income to be secure. We needed the Riverside contract, Marcus continued, speaking over her. The error that almost cost you your position? The one blamed on the intern who conveniently left the company the next week? That was me covering for your mistakes, Jake. You screwed up the documentation. You missed 3 critical deadlines. I buried it, made it disappear, because that was part of our deal. Jake stared at Emma, waiting for her to deny it, to tell him Marcus was manipulating the truth. But she just stood there, tears streaming down her face, her silence confirming everything. I couldn't let you fail, Emma whispered. Everything we wanted, the house in Ballard, the wedding, the life we were building, it all required both of us to be employed and stable. If you got fired, so you sold yourself to save my job? Jake's voice came out strangled. You let him, you. I saved our future. Emma's voice cracked with desperation. Do you understand what would have happened? You would have been terminated, blacklisted in the industry. We would have lost everything. The down payment we saved, the wedding we planned, all of it gone. I made a choice to protect what we had. Marcus stood, buttoning his suit jacket with methodical precision. Here's where we are now, Jake. You have 2 options. Option 1. You walk out of here, quit, lose your severance, and Emma loses her position too. You both start over with nothing, and good luck explaining the gap in your employment to future employers. Option 2. You stay silent. You keep working. Emma keeps her promotion. We all pretend this conversation never happened. You're insane, Jake said, but his voice held no conviction. The trap Marcus had built was perfect. Marcus moved toward the door, his hand resting on the handle. Oh, and Jake, before you make your decision, there's one more thing you should know. He paused, turning back with an expression of calculated cruelty. Emma's pregnant. 12 weeks. Given the timeline, well, we'll need to figure out whose child it is. Mine or yours. The words detonated in Jake's chest like a bomb. Emma's hand flew to her stomach, her eyes wide with panic. Marcus, you said you wouldn't. Plans change, Marcus said simply. He opened the door, the sound of the hallway beyond filtering in. Think carefully about your next move, Jake. You have until Monday morning to decide. The door closed behind him, and suddenly the conference room felt impossibly small. Jake stared at Emma across the table, this woman he'd planned to marry, who carried a child that might not even be his. Their shared future, the one they'd built together over 3 years, lay in ashes between them. Emma reached out her hand. Jake, please, I love you. I did this because I love. Don't, Jake said, his voice hollow. Don't say that word to me right now. If you were Jake in this moment, would you walk out or stay to hear more? Drop your answer below. I need to know what you'd choose. The silence in the conference room was suffocating. Emma stood frozen near the wall, her hand still extended toward Jake, tears streaming down her face. Jake couldn't look at her, couldn't process the pregnancy revelation, the 8 months of deception, the cold calculation in Marcus's voice as he'd laid out the arrangement like a business transaction. Then Jake's phone buzzed in his pocket. The sound cut through the heavy air like a knife. Jake pulled it out with shaking hands, expecting maybe a text from a friend, something normal from the world that existed before 7 p.m. tonight. But the message was from an unknown number. The text read, "This is Angela Torres, HR Director. Conference room, B has been recording for 47 minutes. We need to talk." Jake's blood went cold. He read the message again, then a 3rd time, trying to make sense of the words. Recording. 47 minutes. That meant everything. Marcus's confession about the arrangement, Emma's admission, the pregnancy revelation, all of it captured on camera. What is it? Emma asked, her voice small and broken. She took a step toward him. Jake, please, talk to me. Jake held up the phone, his hand trembling. Someone was watching us. The whole time. HR has been recording this entire conversation. Emma's face went white. What? No, that's not how. Angela Torres, Jake said, his voice hollow. The HR director. She just texted me. Emma's legs seemed to give out. She sank against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the floor, her turquoise blazer bunched around her. Oh God. Oh my God. Jake, if HR has that recording, then everyone knows. Jake finished. About you and Marcus. About the arrangement. About him covering my mistakes in exchange for. He couldn't finish the sentence. Outside in the hallway, footsteps echoed. Marcus's footsteps, Jake realized with growing dread. But they weren't hurried or panicked. They were steady, confident, almost leisurely. Like Marcus knew exactly what was happening and wasn't concerned at all. He knows about the recording, Emma whispered, staring at the closed door. That's why he looked so calm when he left. He knows someone's been watching. Jake's mind raced. If Marcus knew about the surveillance and still said everything he'd said, still laid out the arrangement and the threats with such casual cruelty, then either he didn't care or he had some way to protect himself. Neither option was good. We're not just dealing with personal problems anymore, Jake said, the realization settling over him like ice water. This is professional destruction. For both of us. If that recording gets out. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Angela Torres. My office. Now. Bring Emma. Don't speak to anyone else. Your entire future depends on the next 30 minutes. The message included a floor number and office location. Jake showed it to Emma, watching her read it with wide, terrified eyes. What do we do? Emma asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. Jake, what do we do? Jake looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since he'd caught her with Marcus. The woman he'd planned to marry. The woman who'd shared his bed for 3 years while secretly making deals with his boss to protect his career. The woman carrying a child that might not be his. Everything between them was broken, shattered beyond recognition. The trust, the future, the life they'd planned in Ballard with the house near the farmer's market, all of it reduced to rubble. But right now, in this moment, they had a bigger problem than their destroyed relationship. We go to Angela's office, Jake said finally. Together. Because whatever happens next, we're both in this now. Emma nodded, pushing herself up from the floor. Her mascara had run down her cheeks, her carefully styled hair falling loose around her face. She looked nothing like the confident senior analyst who'd walked into the office that morning. Jake stood, his legs unsteady, and moved toward the door. Emma followed a few steps behind, maintaining distance as if she understood that he couldn't bear to have her close right now. As Jake reached for the door handle, he paused. Emma. Yeah. After we deal with HR, after whatever this is, we're done. You understand that, right? We're done. Emma's face crumpled, but she nodded. I understand. Jake opened the door and stepped into the hallway, Emma behind him. The office was still mostly empty, just a few lights burning in distant cubicles. Somewhere above them, Angela Torres was waiting. And somewhere in this building, Marcus Hyland was making his own moves, confident and unconcerned despite the recording that should have destroyed him. If you've made it this far, you're invested in Jake's story. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because this is only getting more intense, and I need you here for what happens next. Trust me, you don't want to miss the next chapter. Jake and Emma walked through the empty office in heavy silence, their footsteps muffled by the carpet. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a harsh, clinical glow. Jake kept several feet of distance between them, unable to bear the thought of being close to her right now. As they passed the executive suite, Jake glanced through the glass walls toward Marcus's corner office. What he saw made him stop dead in his tracks. Marcus was on his phone, pacing back and forth behind his desk. But the calm, collected demeanor from the conference room had completely vanished. His face was flushed, his free hand gesturing wildly as he spoke. Even from this distance, Jake could see the tension in his shoulders, the frantic energy in his movements. Jake! Emma had stopped beside him, following his gaze. What's... He's calling someone, Jake said quietly. Right now? About us. Through the glass, Marcus turned and his eyes locked with Jake's. For a moment, they just stared at each other across the distance. Then Marcus's expression twisted into something between rage and desperation. He said something sharp into the phone and started moving toward his office door. We need to go, Emma said, her voice tight with fear. Now, they broke into a run, their dress shoes clicking against the floor as they headed for the elevator bank. Jake slammed his hand against the call button, his heart hammering against his ribs. Behind them, he could hear Marcus's office door bang open. "Come on, come on," Emma whispered, pressing the button repeatedly as if it would make the elevator arrive faster. The elevator dinged. The doors began to slide open with agonizing slowness. Jake and Emma rushed inside, and Jake immediately hit the button for Angela's floor. The doors started to close. "Wait!" Marcus's voice echoed through the hallway. Jake could see him now, sprinting toward them, his tie loosened and his perfectly styled hair falling across his forehead. He looked nothing like the controlled executive who'd calmly destroyed Jake's life 20 minutes ago. "Close, please close," Emma breathed beside Jake, her body pressed against the back wall of the elevator. The doors were inches from ceiling when Marcus's hand shot between them. The safety sensor caught it, and the doors jerked back open. Marcus stood in the doorway, breathing hard, his eyes wild. "You don't understand what you're doing," Marcus said, his voice ragged. "If you go to Angela, if you talk to HR, I will destroy both of you. I have insurance you don't even know about. Get away from us," Jake said, his voice stronger than he felt. "You think you're the victims here?" Marcus's laugh was bitter and unhinged. "You think this is just about Emma's little arrangement? Jake, if you walk into that office, I will make sure everyone knows you were complicit, that you knew everything and allowed it to continue." "That's a lie," Emma said, her voice shaking. "Jake didn't know anything. Who do you think they'll believe?" Marcus snarled. "The operations director with 15 years at this company, or the failing analyst and his ambitious girlfriend who spread?" Jake lunged forward, but Emma grabbed his arm, holding him back. Marcus smiled at the reaction, seeming to regain some of his composure. "Here's what you don't know," Marcus said, his voice dropping to something colder, more calculated. "Emma's not the only one. There are 5 others. 5 other women who will testify that you knew everything, Jake. That you encouraged Emma to make the arrangement because you wanted to save your own career. That you used her as." Jake hit the door close button repeatedly. The elevator began to override the safety sensor, the doors starting to seal despite Marcus's hand. "You knew," Marcus shouted as the gap narrowed. "They'll all say you knew. I'll make sure of it. You're finished, both of you. Do you hear me? You're." The doors sealed with a final, definitive thunk, cutting off Marcus's voice. The elevator lurched into motion, carrying them upward. Jake's hands were shaking so badly, he had to grip the railing to steady himself. Beside him, Emma had gone deathly pale. "Jake," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the elevator. What did he mean by 5 others? Jake stared at the ascending floor numbers, his mind racing. 5 others. 5 other women Marcus had made arrangements with. 5 other lives destroyed by whatever operation Marcus had been running. And Marcus was prepared to make them all testify against Jake, to paint him as complicit in something he'd known nothing about until tonight. "I don't know," Jake said finally. "But we're about to find out." The elevator continued its ascent toward Angela Torres's floor, toward answers that Jake wasn't sure he was ready to hear. Behind them, somewhere in the building, Marcus was making calls, building his defense, preparing to destroy them both. And ahead of them waited an HR director who'd been watching everything. What do you think Marcus meant by 5 others? Is Emma really the only woman he manipulated, or is this way bigger? Give me your theories in the comments. The elevator doors opened onto the 23rd floor, a level Jake had never visited before. Angela Torres's office was at the end of a quiet hallway, her name etched on a frosted glass door. Jake's hand hesitated on the handle before he pushed it open. What he saw inside made him stop breathing. The office wasn't just an office. 3 entire walls were covered with monitors, at least a dozen screens showing different conference rooms throughout the building. Some were dark, but others displayed empty chairs and tables, cameras positioned to capture every angle. This wasn't simple security footage. This was systematic surveillance. Angela Torres stood from behind her desk. She was in her mid-40s, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, wearing a gray suit that matched the severity of her expression. Close the door, please, she said. And lock it. Jake did as instructed, his hands shaking. Emma stood close behind him, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Sit down, Angela said, gesturing to 2 chairs across from her desk. We don't have much time, so I need you both to listen carefully. How long have you been watching us? Jake asked, his voice hollow. 6 months, Angela said. Since the 3rd complaint against Marcus Hyland mysteriously disappeared from our system. I started my own investigation, off the books, with surveillance equipment that corporate legal doesn't know about. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. 3 complaints before me. 3 that I know of, Angela confirmed. Probably more that were buried before I started paying attention. Marcus has been running this operation for years, targeting women who work here, offering career advancement in exchange for companionship and silence. The pattern is identical every time. Jake felt sick. Why didn't you stop him? Because I needed evidence that would hold up. Marcus is careful. The arrangements are always verbal, always deniable. Until tonight, I'd never caught him admitting the full scope on camera. Angela pulled up a video file on her computer, turning the screen toward them. This recording is evidence of coercion, abuse of power, and conspiracy. But it's not enough to bring him down completely. I need cooperation from his victims. I'll cooperate, Emma said immediately. I'll testify. It's not that simple, Angela interrupted. Marcus knows about the surveillance now. He's already preparing his counterattack. I need someone on the inside. Someone who can get him to admit everything again while wearing a wire. Someone he doesn't suspect. She looked directly at Jake. No, Jake said, shaking his head. Absolutely not. I'm done with this company. Done with Marcus. Done with all of. One of the 5 women Marcus mentioned is Sarah Chun, Angela said quietly. Jake's blood went cold. Sarah Chun, his friend since his first day at Cascade Financial Group. Sarah, who always stayed late at the office, who'd become quieter over the past 2 years, who'd stopped joining them for happy hours. Sarah? Jake's voice cracked. She's been. For 2 years, Angela confirmed. She came to me last month, broke down in this office, told me everything. But she's terrified to testify. Marcus threatened her family, her career, everything. You're the only person she trusts, Jake. Emma made a sound like a wounded animal. I knew about 2 others, she whispered. I saw Marcus with another woman once, late at night. And I heard rumors about someone in accounting. But I thought my situation was different, that I'd chosen it. You didn't choose anything, Angela said firmly. Marcus manipulated you. All of you. Angela's phone rang, cutting through the tension. She answered, her expression growing darker with each passing second. When? She asked. How long ago? A pause. I understand. Thank you. She hung up and looked at Jake and Emma with something close to fear in her eyes. Marcus just filed a counter-complaint with corporate legal. He's accusing you, Jake, of harassment. Claims Emma came to him for protection from your unwanted advances, and that you've been retaliating against her ever since. That's insane, Jake said. That's a complete lie. I know. But he's submitted doctored emails, fabricated witness statements, and a timeline that makes his version look credible. Corporate legal is required to freeze all related evidence pending investigation, which means my surveillance footage becomes inadmissible until their inquiry is complete. How long? Emma asked. Could be weeks. Months. And in that time, Marcus will use every resource he has to discredit you both, intimidate the other women into silence, and bury this entire thing. Angela opened her desk drawer and pulled out a small device, no bigger than a button. Unless we get him on record in the next 12 hours, admitting to the coercion before corporate legal's freeze takes effect. She held out the wire toward Jake. You go back to work tomorrow morning. Act normal. Get Marcus alone and get him talking. Make him think you're considering his ultimatum, that you might stay quiet. Whatever it takes to get a confession. Jake stared at the tiny device. Emma's hand gripped his arm, her fingers digging into his sleeve. If I do this, Jake said slowly, what happens to Emma? If you get the confession, Emma's testimony becomes part of a pattern. She's a victim, not a co-conspirator. If you don't, Angela's voice hardened. Marcus wins. His version becomes the official record. Emma loses her job and possibly faces charges as an accomplice. And Sarah and the others, they stay trapped. Forever. The office fell silent except for the hum of the monitors on the walls, each screen a window into Marcus's web of control. Angela's voice cut through the quiet. If you don't do this, Marcus wins, and Sarah and the others stay trapped forever. So what's it going to be, Jake? Jake looked at the wire in Angela's outstretched hand, then at Emma's tear-streaked face, then at the monitors showing the empty conference rooms where lives had been destroyed. Marcus's threat echoed in his mind. 5 others who would testify Jake knew everything. 12 hours until corporate legal froze all evidence. One chance to expose the truth or lose everything. This is where I need to hear from you. If you want to see how Jake's choice plays out, if you need to know whether he can expose Marcus or if everything falls apart, drop part 2 in the comments right now. And hit that like button and subscribe, because I can only continue this story if you show me you're invested. Don't leave Jake hanging. Comment part 2 below.